Beneath the brittle crust of Australia's dry sclerophyll forests and sun-seared grasslands, where gum leaves crackle underfoot and the air tastes of dust, another world breathes in silence. The wombat, stocky and unassuming at the surface, is the architect of this hidden dimension. Its claws, blunt and powerful like chisels designed for stone, carve through compacted soils and clay-rich slopes with an efficiency that belies its lumbering gait. To the casual observer, these burrows may appear little more than dark holes pocking a hillside. Yet step inside, or rather follow the camera's eye as it descends into the earth, and a living labyrinth unfurls. Passages branch like veins, connecting to chambers where the air is still, cool and weighted with the scent of mineral earth. Here, light cannot penetrate, but life can endure what the surface cannot. The wombat's tunnels are not random excavations. They are works of quiet engineering, evolved over millions of years of pressure from fire, heat, and seasonal drought. Entrances angle downward, preventing smoke and flames from rushing straight in. Chambers deepen at strategic points, each curve shaped not by accident, but by instinctive calculation. Airflow circulates through multiple exits, drawing in oxygen and carrying out stale breath, so that animals sheltering within do not suffocate. The soil itself becomes a thermal blanket, buffering extremes in temperature, while the surface may scorch under a firestorm's advance or freeze in the depths of winter night. Conditions inside remain surprisingly stable. A burrow 10 meters long can reduce surface temperatures by more than 30 degrees, creating a refuge where small lungs can keep working while chaos rages above. It is in moments of fire that the wombat's role as an ecological host emerges most dramatically. Australia's forests burn with a ferocity unfamiliar to most of the world. Crowned eucalypts release oils that vaporize and ignite, flames racing across ridges with the speed of a sprinting animal. For creatures too small to outrun, too fragile to resist, survival depends not on escape, but on finding a fortress. Field studies and eyewitness accounts during major bushfires reveal reptiles, marsupial mice, even echidnas retreating into wombat burrows. Some are carried by instinct, others by chance, stumbling across an entrance just as heat sears the air. Once inside, their odds of survival increase exponentially. The wombat itself does not play the role of altruistic gatekeeper. It may not even acknowledge its unexpected guests, but its construction provides a shelter of last resort for a community of creatures far beyond its own kind. The ecological implications ripple outward. After fire passes, scorched landscapes can remain silent for weeks, the soil still radiating heat, the canopy blackened to skeletal frames. Yet life emerges first from these burrows. Lizards slip out, testing the air for insect movement. Small marsupials scurry to forage on seeds that survived in soil pockets. In this sense, wombat burrows are more than fortresses. They are launch pads for recolonization. By serving as survival chambers during catastrophe, they effectively seed resilience into the ecosystem. Without them, local populations of certain small animals might vanish entirely after a single blaze, their lineages cut short by a wall of fire. Beyond flames, the burrows also moderate extremes in another elemental force, water. In storms that follow droughts, torrential rains slam into hardened ground, sheeting off slopes in destructive floods. The wombat's tunnels act as drainage conduits, channeling surface water into deeper soils. In doing so, they slow erosion, anchor roots, and create moist microhabitats that persist long after surrounding soils have dried. This dual role, guardian against both fire and flood, marks the wombat as a keystone engineer, shaping environments for species that may never cross paths with the animal itself. An insect laying eggs in the damp clay wall of a tunnel, a frog finding a pocket of humidity weeks into a dry spell, even a mycorrhizal fungus extending its threads along aerated soil corridors, all are indirect beneficiaries of this subterranean infrastructure. The wombat's survival strategy is written in its body as much as in its tunnels. Its slow metabolism allows it to withstand extended stays underground, where food is absent but safety is assured. In summer heat waves, wombats may linger in their burrows during the day, emerging only under the cloak of night to graze on wiry grasses and sedges. Their backward-facing pouch, a detail often overlooked, is in fact an adaptation honed for excavation. Unlike kangaroos, whose forward-facing pouch would fill with soil, the wombat's marsupial cradle shields its young from debris as the mother digs. Evolution has sculpted not just an animal, but an entire life cycle around the act of burrowing. There is a paradox at play here. Above ground, wombats seem clumsy, even stubborn, waddling with deliberate steps, their cube-shaped droppings marking territory along ridges. Predators such as dingoes may give chase, but a wombat rarely runs in open ground for long. Instead, it barrels into the nearest tunnel, pressing its armored rump, a plate of cartilage and bone, against the entrance. Any predator attempting to follow is met with a wall as unyielding as stone, sometimes even crushed if the wombat lunges backward with force. Below ground, strength becomes not just survival, but sovereignty. The wombat's resilience, however, faces limits in the modern age. Climate change has amplified fire frequency and intensity, testing the very system wombats helped shape. Burrows that once offered refuge for occasional flames must now serve as bastions against megafires that burn hotter, longer, and across broader landscapes. In some regions, the soil itself is altered by repeated burns, collapsing tunnels, or reducing their insulating power. Land clearing further erodes their habitat, cutting away the very slopes where burrows anchor. Yet even under these pressures, wombats continue their patient digging, renewing old networks or carving new ones into the fabric of the earth. The camera lingers now on a night scene. A wombat emerges cautiously from its entrance, its fur haloed by the moonlight. Behind it, in the darkness of the chamber, faint movements betray other occupants, an Echidnas darting toward the safety of shadows, a gecko clinging to the clay wall, eyes reflecting the light like pinpricks. None of these creatures owe allegiance to the wombat, and the wombat asks for none. This is coexistence by necessity, survival through proximity. And it is this quiet, unintended generosity that secures the wombat's place not just as a solitary grazer of the grasslands, but as a structural pillar of ecosystems caught between fire and flood. To study these burrows is to read a record of adaptation etched into soil. Depth equals time. That is the rule of survival here. The deeper the tunnel, the longer life can hold its breath against flame, smoke, or storm. Every meter down is a wager against extinction, an investment in tomorrow's return to the surface. What the wombat builds is not just a home for itself, but a system that holds together fragments of an ecosystem when the world above collapses. In the arithmetic of fire ecology, where destruction is measured in hectares lost and species displaced, the wombat's burrow is a counterweight, small but profound, balancing the scales with chambers of earth and breath. Across Australia's patchwork of landscapes, from the brittle spinifex plains of the interior to the shaded woodlands edging the coast, one silhouette cuts a commanding figure against the horizon. The goanna, a monitor lizard of the genus Varanus, is at once a predator, a scavenger, and perhaps most surprisingly, an architect. Its tongue flickers in and out with tireless rhythm, tasting the air for the faintest chemical trace of prey. Muscles ripple beneath rough, pebbled skin as it moves with a gait that feels both deliberate and unstoppable, claws leaving impressions in the dust. This is a creature designed for pursuit and power, yet hidden within its predatory life is an act of construction that shapes ecosystems in unexpected ways. The cycle begins when the female goanna seeks a place to secure her offspring. Unlike mammals, she cannot brood her young, nor does she have the luxury of guarding a nest for long months. Instead, she must entrust her future to an external incubator. Here, evolution has revealed its cunning. Goannas exploit one of the most efficient natural ovens in the animal kingdom, the termite mound. Rising like earthen citadels from the ground, these mounds are more than insect colonies. They are climate-regulated structures, built with a precision that rivals human engineering. Ventilation shafts manage airflow, while porous walls balance heat and humidity. For termites, this ensures their fungal crops and queens survive. For goannas, it provides a ready-made nursery with near-constant incubation conditions. When a female goanna claws into the mound, it is an act of brute force against refined architecture. Soil and saliva-hardened walls crumble under her digging, chambers collapse, and termites scatter in frenzied defense. Yet this destructive intrusion is not the end of the mound's life. It is the beginning of a new collaboration. The female deposits her eggs deep inside, sometimes dozens at a time, and departs. The termites, following instinct rather than any sympathy, begin to repair the damage. Walls are resealed, tunnels patched, and the mound returns to outward stability. In doing so, the insects inadvertently entomb the goanna's clutch within a chamber of precisely moderated heat and humidity, a system more consistent than sunlight-warmed sand or leaf litter could ever provide. For 9 months, the eggs remain sealed away, shielded from predators, drought, and sudden cold snaps, their embryos developing within this fortress, maintained by the very creatures their mother raided. When the hatchlings finally emerge, their journey is no less remarkable. Some species hatch in synchrony, clawing upward through hardened soil with tiny limbs, while others may wait for seasonal rains to soften the mound, easing their ascent to the surface. Those that reach daylight step into a world already primed with danger. Raptors circle above, snakes hunt along the ground, and even other goannas may devour the young. Few survive their first weeks, but those that do carry forward a lineage that has thrived for millions of years in climates both harsh and forgiving. The ecological consequences of this cycle extend far beyond reproduction. Once a mound has been breached, altered, and abandoned, it becomes real estate for a host of other species. Skinks slip into the cracks to lay their own eggs, snakes coil in the hollow warmth, and small marsupials use the cavities as retreats against heat and predators. The mound, once strictly the dominion of termites, becomes a shared resource, transformed by the violent intervention of a predator into a communal shelter. In this way, goannas act as inadvertent ecosystem engineers, redistributing space and creating opportunities for species that could never build such structures themselves. Beyond termite mounds, goannas also dig into sandy soils or beneath tree roots, carving tunnels where eggs can rest until hatching. These excavations leave behind loosened earth that aerates the soil, increasing infiltration of rainwater and improving the conditions for plant roots and microorganisms. Over time, such turnover contributes to the health of the landscape itself, renewing ground that might otherwise remain compacted and lifeless. Few would associate a reptilian hunter with soil fertility, yet the link is undeniable. In the constant cycling of digging, nesting, and abandonment, goannas keep the land breathing. Life as a goanna, however, is more than engineering. These lizards occupy the role of apex predators in many ecosystems, hunting birds, mammals, reptiles, and carrion alike. Their forked tongue and Jacobson's organ grant them a chemical map of the environment, able to detect the scent of a carcass kilometers away. This sense, coupled with raw strength, allows them to control populations of smaller animals, maintaining balance in a food web that could otherwise tip into overabundance. In some Aboriginal traditions, the goanna is both feared and revered, seen as a provider of meat and fat, yet also as a powerful totem tied to the cycles of land and life. The dual identity of the goanna, predator and builder, highlights a deeper principle of ecological systems. Construction does not always come from gentleness, nor does destruction always signify loss. The act of tearing open a termite mound is, for the termites, a catastrophe. Yet in the broader scope of the ecosystem, it creates new functions, layering habitats upon habitats. Predation itself, so often viewed as violent reduction, can set the stage for regeneration. Dead animals consumed by goannas return nutrients to the soil. Burrows left behind become sanctuaries. Termite mounds cracked open become multi-purpose shelters. The system thrives not in spite of this predator's actions, but because of them. To watch a goanna basking on a sun-warmed rock is to see only half the story. Beneath its stillness lies a metabolic engine tuned to the environment, its body temperature rising and falling with the sun. Thermoregulation dictates its daily rhythm, hunting when warmth fuels agility, retreating when the heat becomes too severe. Yet its reproductive strategy, outsourcing incubation to termite mounds, reveals a different mastery. Where mammals invest energy in nurturing young internally, and birds shield eggs with vigilant care, the goanna leverages another species' labor. It is evolution's version of opportunistic partnership, a reminder that survival often means recognizing and exploiting efficiencies already perfected by others. This strategy, however, is not without vulnerability. Termite mounds have declined in some areas due to land clearing, soil compaction, and altered fire regimes. Without them, goannas may be forced to rely more heavily on exposed nests in unstable ground, reducing hatchling survival rates. Furthermore, introduced predators such as foxes and feral cats prey heavily on eggs and young goannas, compounding pressures that natural selection alone may not balance. The fate of the goanna is thus tied not only to its own adaptations, but also to the survival of the ecosystems it co-opts and shapes. As the chapter closes, the camera pans across a burned woodland where blackened trunks rise like charred spires. Amid the devastation, a solitary termite mound remains, its outer shell intact, its inhabitants still tending to their queen. Along its flank, a scar reveals where a female goanna once dug, her clutch now sealed within. The landscape may appear broken, but within this mound, life persists, nurtured by the unlikely collaboration of predator and insect. Soon, with the turning of seasons, tiny claws will scrape upward, and another generation will step into the sun. The mound will bear their passage, becoming once again a borrowed nursery, a structure of shared survival written into the earth by the rough hand of a hunter. In the ledger of ecological roles, the goanna's contribution is easily overlooked in favor of its fearsome presence. Yet its legacy is not only in the lives it takes, but also in the habitats it creates, the soil it stirs, and the chances it grants to species that follow in its wake. Predator-made housing reminds us that in nature, construction and destruction are rarely opposites. They are threads of the same fabric, woven through time by creatures who shape their world in ways we are only beginning to understand. High above the forest floor, where the air hangs thick with humidity and shafts of light pierce the canopy like golden arrows, an empire of leaves sways with the wind. It is here, in the tangled crowns of tropical trees and along the brackish margins of mangrove forests, that the green ant, Oecophila smaragdina, has perfected one of the most intricate acts of collective architecture in the natural world. Suspended in the branches, their nests shimmer faintly with a living gloss. Entire cities woven from foliage, stitched together not by chance, but by the labor of thousands of tiny bodies moving with uncanny precision. Each structure is at once fortress, nursery, and staging ground, but its true wonder lies in how it comes to exist at all. The construction begins with a problem too large for any one ant to solve. A single leaf cannot form a chamber unless it bends to meet another, but the leaf is broad, fibrous, and unyielding compared to the strength of an individual worker. Yet where strength fails, cooperation succeeds. Dozens of ants line the edge of a leaf, their hooked claws digging into the waxy surface. Others grip their bodies, forming living chains that stretch across open air like makeshift bridges. Inch by inch, they pull separate leaves toward each other, tension coursing through their own exoskeletons as if they were strands of a muscular thread. The colony transforms itself into scaffolding, tool and lever all at once, bending vegetation into improbable configurations. Once two leaves touch, the real magic begins. Workers rush larvae to the seam, gently pinching their soft, worm-like bodies until they exude silk. Unlike the hard, glistening strands of spider silk spun into webs, green ant silk is a flexible glue laid in patches that weld leaf edge to leaf edge. The larvae, too young to resist, are wielded like caulking guns in the mandibles of adults. This act of cooperative manipulation, using their young as living tools, is among the most astonishing behaviors in the insect world. In time, the seam sets, the leaves remain bound, and the chamber becomes a sealed capsule, one among many that will make up the nest. Layer after layer of foliage is stitched into position until the colony inhabits a fabric not of wood or stone, but of leaves braided by silk and muscle. The result is a structure uniquely suited to the precarious realm of the canopy. Unlike rigid constructions, these nests flex and sway with the wind. Gusts that would snap branches or tear apart brittle chambers merely ripple through the woven fabric, dispersing energy across the colony's living seams. In a cyclone-prone environment, such elasticity is survival. The nest does not resist the storm, it yields to it, and in yielding, it endures. This adaptability mirrors the ants themselves, individuals insignificant in isolation, formidable only in unison, their power amplified by the choreography of thousands. Inside the nest, conditions are carefully regulated, though not through conscious design. The silk-sealed chambers trap humidity, reducing water loss in an environment where drying winds can desiccate small bodies within minutes. The layered leaves insulate against sudden temperature swings, shading the brood from midday heat while retaining warmth at night. Workers shuttle eggs, larvae, and pupae between chambers as conditions shift, adjusting the microclimate by relocation rather than renovation. Every movement is purposeful, every relocation a decision rooted in evolutionary fine-tuning. Beyond the boundaries of their leafy fortresses, green ants shape the ecology of the forest. Their colonies, sometimes stretching across dozens of trees and housing hundreds of thousands of individuals, function as mobile armies. Patrol lines march along branches, mandibles spread wide, ready to seize any intruder. Caterpillars, beetle larvae, or small arthropods are swarmed in seconds, their struggles silenced beneath a carpet of green bodies. The ants' relentless predation creates corridors of pest control that ripple outward through the canopy. Trees harboring green ant nests often show reduced herbivory, their leaves spared from the unchecked appetites of caterpillars. Farmers in parts of Southeast Asia and northern Australia have long exploited this, encouraging green ant colonies in orchards as a living pesticide, centuries before the notion of biological control entered modern science. But the ants' influence extends still further. Their nests, suspended like lanterns in the canopy, become micro-habitats in their own right. Small spiders and other insects exploit the edges of these leaf-sewn cities, feeding on scraps, wastes, or careless prey that stumble into the colony's orbit. Some species even evolve to mimic the ant's shape or scent, infiltrating the nest to steal food or brood. In this way, the colony becomes not just a single species fortress, but a hub of ecological interactions, parasitism, mimicry, commensalism, each thread woven into the broader tapestry of life. The green ant's social structure is strict yet flexible, its hierarchy dictated not by physical castes as rigid as those in termites, but by behavioral specialization. Workers may forage, nurse brood, or participate in construction, shifting roles depending on the colony's needs. Queens remain hidden in deep chambers, producing eggs that sustain the population. Soldiers, larger and more formidable, defend the nest entrances with jaws that can puncture human skin, their bite enhanced by formic acid sprayed into the wound. For animals many times their size, this defense is a meaningful deterrent. Birds, reptiles, even primates think twice before provoking a tree bristling with ant colonies. And yet, irony persists. These same ants, feared for their bite, are themselves consumed. Aboriginal Australians have long harvested green ants, not only as food but also as medicine. The ants' bodies and eggs, crushed into a drink, yield a citrus tang derived from the formic acid they carry, rich in vitamin C and used as a remedy for colds. In this, human culture intersects with insect adaptation, drawing sustenance from the very chemicals that deter predators. The ants' fortresses in the canopy are thus woven not just into the fabric of the forest, but also into the traditions of people who have lived alongside them for millennia. The story of the green ant is also one of expansion across boundaries. Colonies do not confine themselves to a single tree. Workers form bridges of living bodies across gaps in the canopy, spanning distances that to them are chasms. Once contact with a new branch is made, the colony extends its dominion, building new nests in new leaves, eventually connecting an entire grove into a single living network. Some colonies spread across more than 100 trees, their collective actions synchronized without central command. What results is a superorganism, a city of cities, distributed yet unified, its architecture defined not by permanence, but by growth, adaptation, and renewal. The ecological significance of such scale is profound. In mangroves, where shifting tides and salt intrusion challenge life at every turn, green ants stabilize insect populations, reducing outbreaks that might otherwise defoliate trees. In tropical forests, their territorial aggression influences the distribution of other ant species, effectively carving the canopy into zones of dominance. Predators such as birds or lizards that specialize in ants must adapt their foraging strategies around these fortresses, altering patterns of predation throughout the food web. Thus, the presence of a green ant colony is never neutral. It is a force that shapes the rhythm of the ecosystem from the smallest insect to the highest branches. The guiding principle of their success lies in a rule simple to state yet difficult to imagine. When bodies become tools, architecture scales with the colony. No individual ant could bend a leaf, wield a larva as glue, or guard an empire spanning hectares. But together, their combined efforts transcend individual limitations. Their biology does not stop at their exoskeletons. It extends into the structures they build, the territories they dominate, and the ecosystems they transform. Their nests are not just shelters, but embodiments of collective will, living monuments to cooperation on a scale rarely matched in the natural world. As the camera pulls back, the canopy unfolds like an emerald ocean, dotted with pale green spheres of leaf-sewn cities. Sunlight glints across them, wind stirs them into motion, and a chorus of insects hums around their edges. Each nest sways, resilient and alive, a product of countless mandibles, endless labor, and the delicate silk of children pressed into service before they could walk. It is a reminder that in nature, even the smallest bodies can combine to alter landscapes, and that survival is as much about building together as it is about standing alone. In the muted light of an Australian woodland, where granite outcrops break through soils dusted with fallen eucalypt leaves, a small solitary figure shuffles across the ground with quiet persistence. The echidna, spiny, low-slung and enigmatic, is a creature that defies easy categorization. It is a mammal, yet it lays eggs. It has fur, yet its back bristles with hardened quills. It feeds not with teeth, but with a long, sticky tongue that darts like a piston into hidden chambers of ants and termites. To the casual eye, it appears almost prehistoric, a fragment from an earlier age that somehow persists in the present. But its oddities are not relics. They are adaptations honed by millions of years of survival in some of the world's most unpredictable environments. The echidna's survival is tied not to speed, size, or aggression, but to the soil itself. When threatened, it does not flee across open ground. Instead, it drills downward with astonishing speed, powerful forelimbs tearing into earth with claws shaped like chisels. Within moments, its body is half buried, quills angled outward in a crown of defense, the vulnerable underside sealed against intrusion. In rocky terrain where soil is thin, it wedges itself beneath logs or stones, presenting only a fortress of spines to any would-be predator. Dingoes may paw at the ground, goannas may circle in curiosity, but few succeed in prying an echidna loose. This technique is more than defense. It is also thermoregulation. By burying itself, even shallowly, the echidna escapes the punishing heat that builds in the Australian summer, trading exposure for the buffered cool of shaded soil. Its biology is tuned to this rhythm of heat and refuge. The echidna's metabolic rate is one of the lowest among mammals, a deliberate slowness that reduces energy demands in a landscape where food is patchy and conditions harsh. Unlike kangaroos or wallabies, which must graze constantly to sustain their high-energy lives, the echidna can survive on modest meals of insects, licking up ants, beetles and termites with a tongue coated in viscous saliva. This tongue is not only adhesive, but also muscular, capable of snaking deep into tunnels and bringing out prey hidden to most other animals. With each feeding, the echidna disturbs soil, prying apart rotten logs, lifting leaf litter, and digging shallow pits. These disturbances scatter insect fragments and open pathways that other scavengers, skinks, small marsupials, even birds quickly exploit. A simple feeding scrape becomes a temporary banquet, an open invitation to others in the ecosystem. The soil turnover the echidna produces carries consequences far beyond feeding. Each excavation, each shallow burrow, mixes layers of soil, aerating compacted ground and creating new niches for microbes and invertebrates. In the process, fungal spores clinging to its spines or stirred from the soil are redistributed across the landscape. Many Australian plants, particularly eucalypts and acacias, rely on symbiotic fungi for nutrient exchange, a hidden partnership beneath the roots that enables them to thrive in nutrient-poor soils. By spreading these spores, the echidna inadvertently becomes a gardener of the forest, linking its own survival to the health of entire plant communities. Where echidnas are active, fungal diversity is greater, and where fungal diversity thrives, so too does the resilience of the woodland. Thermal refuge is at the heart of the echidna's design. Its shallow digs are not elaborate warrens like those of wombats, nor towering fortresses like termite mounds. Instead, they are quick escapes, temperature valves that allow the animal to toggle between hostile and habitable environments. When midday heat pushes surface temperatures beyond 40 degrees Celsius, the echidna can retreat just a few centimeters into the soil, where the temperature is dramatically lower. At night, when the air cools sharply, it may emerge again, relying on its spines and fur to retain heat. This ability to exploit microhabitats gives the echidna an extraordinary range, from coastal forests to arid deserts, each environment buffered by its simple yet effective method of thermoregulation. Its physiology reinforces this strategy. Echidnas are capable of entering torpor, a temporary lowering of body temperature and metabolic rate that conserves energy during extreme conditions. In colder climates, this can extend into hibernation lasting months, a rarity among mammals in Australia. During these periods, the animal's body temperature may fall close to that of its surroundings, a near suspension that allows it to wait out resource scarcity. This flexibility is key. In a land where seasons oscillate between drought, flood, fire, and frost, survival favors those who can endure, not those who can dominate. The reproductive cycle of the echidna reflects this patient resilience. Each breeding season, males form trains, following a receptive female in single file, sometimes for weeks, until one wins the right to mate. The female then retreats to a burrow or hollow log to lay a single leathery egg, which she deposits directly into a pouch-like fold of skin. Within 10 days, the egg hatches into a tiny, underdeveloped young, a puggle, no larger than a jelly bean. For weeks, it remains in the pouch, suckling milk that seeps from specialized mammary patches, since echidnas, like all monotremes, lack nipples. Eventually, when the puggle begins to develop spines, the mother places it in a nursery burrow, returning periodically to nurse. Here again, the soil provides safety, insulation, and stability, ensuring the survival of the next generation. Predators play an important role in shaping echidna behavior. Raptors such as wedge-tailed eagles may attempt to seize them in open ground, while dingoes and foxes test their defenses. Yet the echidna's spines, flexible muscles, and digging ability combine into a nearly impregnable defense. Some predators have learned to flip them over to expose their vulnerable belly, but success is rare. Most attackers abandon the effort, conserving their energy for easier prey. This resilience ensures that echidnas, though solitary and slow, persist across vast landscapes where other small mammals have vanished. There is an irony in the echidna's ecological role. By acting as both predator and gardener, consuming insects while enhancing soil and plant health, it occupies a dual position in the ecosystem. It reduces insect populations that might otherwise defoliate plants, while simultaneously supporting those plants through fungal dispersal. Its constant digging creates countless microhabitats that other species depend on, yet its own survival depends on the same soil it disturbs. In this balance lies a subtle lesson. In nature, disturbance is not always destruction. Often, it is renewal. Human interactions with echidnas reflect a mixture of fascination and misunderstanding. To many, they appear as curiosities, primitive relics of evolution, lumped together with the platypus as evolutionary outliers. But recent studies have revealed the complexity of their adaptations, from electroreceptors in their snouts that detect the faint electrical signals of insect prey, to their ability to survive in environments spanning alpine snowfields to arid scrub. Far from being primitive, they are specialized, honed for survival in ways mammals with more conventional traits could not manage. As the camera lingers on a shaded woodland floor, an echidna pauses at the base of a fallen log. With deliberate effort, it presses its snout into the decaying wood, tongue flicking rapidly, pulling ants from hidden galleries. Soil spills outward as its claws scrape deeper, and the forest responds. Insects scatter, fungi spores are disturbed, and the ground is left loosened for seedlings and roots. Within minutes, the animal moves on, leaving behind not just a feeding pit, but a small transformation in the ecosystem's fabric. The simplicity of the act belies its significance. In the larger narrative of Australia's landscapes, scarred by fire, reshaped by flood and tested by drought, the echidna represents persistence through moderation. It does not build monumental structures, nor does it dominate through speed or aggression. Instead, it survives by managing heat and scarcity with quiet precision, by using soil as shield and larder, by moving slowly enough that energy is never wasted. Its rule is as clear as it is profound. Thermal refuge defines the boundary of survival, and the ability to create even the smallest cool chamber can tip the balance between life and death. Seen this way, the echidna is more than an oddity. It is a custodian of balance, a spiny gardener whose shallow burrows keep ecosystems breathing. In a world where extremes are becoming sharper with every season, its strategy offers a lesson in endurance. Life need not conquer to persist. Sometimes it only needs to dig down, wait out the heat, and let the earth itself provide the cool chamber in which tomorrow can begin again. At the edge of a still forest pool, where moonlight ripples across the surface and cicadas pulse in rhythmic waves from the canopy, the air comes alive with a chorus of amphibian voices. Among them is a softer, more urgent sound, a thrumming, guttural churn from a tree frog that is less about song than about labor. The frog positions itself at a low-hanging branch that dips toward the water, or at the fringe of reeds where roots and stems interlace above the surface. With strong hind legs and tireless forelimbs, it begins a task that is as strange as it is ingenious, the construction of a cradle not from sticks or leaves, but from foam. The process is frenetic. The parent frog whips mucus into a froth, beating air into its secretions until bubbles begin to coalesce, each one shimmering faintly with the surface tension of life itself. This is no random froth. It is infused with oxygen, creating an airy structure that is both insulating and breathable. As the mass expands, the frog deposits eggs inside, sealing them into the matrix of bubbles. What emerges is a white, spongy clump that clings to leaves, branches, or the bank, an ephemeral nursery designed to withstand heat, desiccation, and the attentions of hungry mouths that patrol the water below. In the humid tropics, where the sun can turn a shallow pond into a cauldron, and predators lurk at every layer of the food chain, such an invention is nothing short of revolutionary. Foam shields the delicate eggs from direct heat, preventing them from cooking under the midday sun. Its bubbles act as a fortress, disguising the embryos from aquatic predators such as fish or aquatic insects that would devour them in an instant if they were left unprotected in open water. Even terrestrial hunters, ants, spiders and lizards, find the shifting, oxygen-rich structure difficult to penetrate. Within this fortress, the embryos develop in relative safety, buoyed by a substance that seems more alchemical than biological. As days pass, the foam cradle transforms into a miniature ecosystem. Moisture trapped within attracts small insects that sip at its surface, and in turn these insects draw spiders and predatory beetles. What was once a protective nursery becomes for a time a hub of feeding activity, a temporary food web sparked into existence by the ingenuity of a frog. Here, shelter and danger cohabit in delicate balance. The foam feeds the forest even as it guards the next generation. The timing of the cradle's collapse is critical. As rain sweeps across the landscape, droplets strike the foam, breaking down its structure and loosening the egg mass. One by one, tadpoles spill into the water below, joining streams and pools already teeming with life. This transition from air cradle to aquatic freedom is perfectly synchronized with the rhythms of the wet season. Rain not only delivers the tadpoles, but also floods the creeks and ponds, diluting predators and increasing available space. The foam's role ends, but its impact persists. By releasing more young than open laying could ever protect, it resets the trajectory of population growth, ensuring that frogs persist in environments where mortality is otherwise staggering. From an evolutionary standpoint, this is one of nature's boldest compromises. Unlike species that guard their eggs vigilantly, tree frogs cannot remain to defend their offspring. Their size and vulnerability forbid such extended protection. Nor can they risk scattering eggs unguarded in water, where near total loss would follow. The foam nest becomes the solution, a temporary, expendable architecture that requires no vigilance but still amplifies survival odds. It is a shelter designed to vanish, its impermanence part of its success. The ecological implications ripple outward. More tadpoles entering the water means more prey for aquatic predators, more nutrients cycling through ponds, and more metamorphs eventually climbing back into the forest. Foam nests, by concentrating reproductive effort in bursts, create pulses of energy that cascade through the food web. Dragonfly larvae gorge on the influx, fish capitalize on the feast, and waterbirds time their nesting to overlap with amphibian abundance. In this sense, the foam cradle does not merely protect frogs, it orchestrates a broader seasonal abundance, asynchronization that binds species across taxonomic divides. Predation, of course, still extracts a toll. Wasps and ants occasionally raid the foam, tearing into it to seize eggs. Certain birds have learned to recognize the gleam of nests and harvest them, but the numbers game remains in the frog's favor. By producing hundreds of eggs in a single foam mass, the parent ensures that even in the face of heavy losses, enough young survive to perpetuate the species. The foam cradle's true genius lies not in absolute protection, but in statistical advantage, shifting survival from near zero to a level that keeps populations stable. The foam nest also interacts with the microclimate in ways that reveal hidden layers of adaptation. Its white, reflective surface reduces heat absorption compared to darker substrates, cooling the interior even under direct sunlight. Its structure traps air, buffering eggs against fluctuations in ambient temperature and humidity. Studies have shown that oxygen levels within the foam remain remarkably high, sustained both by the bubbles themselves and by diffusion across the moist, porous surface. In a world where amphibians are often considered vulnerable to even slight environmental shifts, this innovation demonstrates an extraordinary resilience. Yet the foam cradle is fragile in the modern age. Pollution in waterways can weaken the structure, while pesticide residues disrupt the mucus chemistry that makes foam formation possible. Habitat destruction removes the overhanging branches and vegetated banks essential for nest placement. Climate change, altering rainfall patterns, can mistime the release of tadpoles, stranding them in shrinking pools or washing them into torrents too turbulent for survival. The foam cradle, once a near-perfect adaptation, now faces tests its makers never evolved to anticipate. Still, resilience endures. In places where habitats remain intact, the sight of a foam nest clinging to a creekside leaf remains a powerful symbol of life's ingenuity. It is a reminder that architecture in nature need not be permanent to matter. Unlike termite mounds or burrows that last for generations, the foam cradle exists for days or weeks at most. Yet in that brief window, it safeguards futures, nourishes ecosystems, and sets in motion processes that ripple far beyond its lifespan. Its impermanence is its strength, allowing it to vanish without consequence once its role is fulfilled. As the rain slackens and the night chorus swells, the camera lingers on a cluster of foam nests gleaming under drops of water. Some are intact, others are dissolving, releasing streams of wriggling tadpoles into the currents. The water below flickers with movement, predators and prey converging in the new abundance. Above, the parent frogs have already departed, returning to the canopy or shoreline vegetation to feed and wait for the next cycle. Their task is done, their offspring cast into the uncertain waters of chance. Temporary shelter, permanent impact. This is the law written in bubbles. The foam cradle may last only days, but the lives it protects echo for years in the form of adult frogs calling from branches, predators nourished by amphibian prey, and ecosystems stabilized by the constant hum of amphibian presence. To see a foam nest is to glimpse the power of fleeting architecture, a structure that proves that sometimes the most lasting changes are built not from stone or soil, but from the fragile, vanishing fabric of air and water whipped into form by a determined parent. In the shallow, sunlit waters along northern Australia, where turquoise seas blend into pale sandbars and the tide lifts and falls like a slow breath, vast meadows stretch across the sea floor. These are not meadows of flowers, but of seagrass, dense underwater fields swaying in rhythm with the currents, filtering light into green ribbons that ripple beneath the surface. To the untrained eye, these submerged pastures seem static, fragile expanses left to the whims of tide and storm. Yet they are shaped, maintained, and rejuvenated by a gardener whose presence is as ancient as it is gentle. The dugong, sometimes called the sea cow. At first glimpse, a dugong seems improbable in this role. With a rounded, fusiform body, paddle-like forelimbs, and a fluked tail reminiscent of dolphins, it carries the unmistakable silhouette of a marine mammal. Its broad muzzle, however, betrays its lineage as the last surviving relative of the once diverse Steller's sea cow, and a cousin to the elephant. This muzzle is not designed for speed or predation, but for uprooting. The dugong grazes the seafloor with a downward-turned snout, whiskers brushing the sediment as it tears at seagrass blades and rhizome. The act appears destructive. Uprooted plants drift in its wake, and scars mark the sand where feeding trails cut swaths through the meadow. But like many natural disturbances, this apparent damage is a catalyst for renewal. Continuous grazing keeps the seagrass in a state of growth, preventing older, nutrient-poor blades from dominating. In trimming the meadow, dugongs stimulate regrowth rich in nitrogen, increasing the nutritional value not only for themselves, but for other herbivores, green turtles, fish, and invertebrates that also feed here. Their feeding lanes, stark against the surrounding grass, become corridors of new shoots, nurseries where juvenile fish shelter and invertebrates find food. The dugong's appetite, immense though it is, consuming up to 40 kilograms of seagrass a day, is the engine that prevents these meadows from stagnating. In this sense, it does not consume the ecosystem, but cultivates it. The ecological reach of this grazing extends beyond food webs into climate regulation. Seagrass meadows are among the planet's most effective carbon sinks, storing carbon at rates many times greater than terrestrial forests. When meadows are healthy and actively growing, they sequester vast amounts of carbon in their sediments, locking it away for centuries. Dugongs, by pruning old growth and encouraging new, amplify this capacity. Their role as meadow makers thus ties them directly to planetary processes, turning the simple act of feeding into a contribution to climate stability. Where dugongs thrive, the ocean's ability to buffer against rising carbon strengthens. Where they decline, meadows collapse, releasing stored carbon back into thesia and atmosphere. The visual footprint of their grazing is striking. Trails etched through the seagrass beds are visible from above, pale scars where the animals have fed. For predators like tiger sharks, these lanes also signal opportunity. Dugongs are large, sometimes exceeding 3 meters in length and weighing over 300 kilograms, but they are not invulnerable. Their slow pace and reliance on shallow meadows expose them to shark attack. Such predation pressures, though dangerous to individuals, play a role in shaping dugong behavior. Populations often move in response to predator presence, distributing their grazing across wider ranges and preventing localized overuse of meadows. In this dance of predator and prey, even fear contributes to ecosystem balance. The dugong's social life adds further texture to its ecological impact. While many are solitary, groups sometimes gather in seagrass-rich areas, creating communal grazing events where dozens feed in relative harmony. These aggregations can strip large patches of seagrass, but the aftermath is a mosaic of regrowth zones at different stages of recovery, increasing habitat diversity. Mating often occurs in such gatherings, where males compete with tusk-like incisors, leaving scars on rivals or on the backs of females. Calves, born after year-long pregnancies, remain close to their mothers, learning migration routes and feeding grounds through long dependence that can last more than a year. This slow reproduction makes dugongs especially vulnerable to decline. Populations cannot quickly rebound from losses. Yet their methodical rhythms of life mirror the slow but enduring processes they sustain beneath the sea. Interactions with other species reveal still more layers of influence. Juvenile fish, often shadow-feeding dugongs, darting into the sediment clouds stirred up by their muzzles. Invertebrates displaced by the disturbance become easy meals, turning the grazer into an inadvertent provider. Even sea dragons and pipefish, cryptic masters of camouflage, benefit from the shifting mosaics of habitat created by grazing lanes. In these subtle ways, dugongs knit together a community of species that depend on meadows not just as static structures, but as dynamic, living systems constantly reshaped by disturbance and renewal. Yet the dugong's greatest lesson may lie in the paradox of its role. Shelter, in its case, is created not by adding, but by removing. Where it grazes, new shoots sprout. Water clarity improves as thriving meadows anchor sediments and fish nurseries multiply. By subtraction, the dugong builds. By eating, it feeds others. By scarring, it heals. This inversion of expectation underscores the complexity of ecosystems, where apparent destruction is often the foundation of resilience. Modern pressures, however, threaten this balance. Seagrass meadows are highly sensitive to changes in water quality. Runoff from agriculture, dredging for coastal development, and warming seas have destroyed vast areas of habitat across northern Australia and beyond. Without meadows, dugongs cannot survive, and without dugongs, the meadows lose one of their primary architects. Traditional knowledge among indigenous coastal communities recognizes this interdependence. For millennia, dugongs have been hunted in sustainable numbers, their meat and fat forming part of cultural practices deeply tied to respect for ecological cycles. Elders often describe dugongs not just as resources, but as indicators. If dugongs are healthy, the sea country is healthy too. Modern conservation efforts increasingly draw on this knowledge, blending ecological science with cultural wisdom to safeguard both animal and habitat. The dugong's presence in myth and folklore also reflects the awe it inspires. Some historians suggest that sailors' tales of mermaids arose from encounters with dugongs glimpsed from the decks of passing ships. Seen from afar, a mother lifting her calf to the surface could be mistaken, in the haze of light and sea spray, for a human form. In truth, the reality is stranger and more profound than any myth. A lineage tied to elephants, living in oceans, shaping seagrass meadows through a relationship as old as the coasts themselves. As the tide turns and the sun arcs lower across the horizon, the camera drifts along a seagrass meadow alive with motion. A dugong grazes slowly, whiskers twitching as it uproots another mouthful. Behind it, a trail unfurls, already being explored by darting fish and curious crustaceans. In the distance, more dugongs surface briefly, their rounded backs glistening before they slip under once again. The meadow, far from being diminished, gleams with new shoots, its productivity renewed by the mouths that consumed it. The dugong's world is fragile, yet it demonstrates a principle both elegant and counterintuitive. Sometimes, to create shelter, one must subtract. By consuming old growth, dugongs carve pathways of renewal, inviting life to flourish in their wake. They are meadow makers, not through construction, but through disturbance, guardians of ecosystems whose strength lies in their constant reshaping. In their slow, deliberate grazing lies the quiet architecture of resilience, a reminder that the future of oceans may hinge not on what is preserved untouched, but on what is allowed to be grazed, renewed, and lived in motion.